everybody, welcome back. This is Jennifer J, and we are starting part 12 tonight. So I hope that you are ready. I'm setting my timer. If you haven't watched before, these are not standalone segments, so you're going to want to go back and start with number 1. If you have watched some of them but haven't watched, all the ones up until 12, please go back and start where you left off because you will have missed a lot. But if you have been watching, welcome back. I hope you're ready to dig in. And I lost my train of thought, sorry. If you would subscribe, I know that there are a lot more people watching than what have actually subscribed. When you do hit the subscribe, there's also a little bell. If you want to click that, it will remind you or send you a notification either on your phone or your email, however you have your phone set up, when a new one airs. And I try to do them every Monday and Thursday. Hopefully I can keep that schedule, but if I ever do goof or miss a day, at least you will get the notification, so that would be helpful. I really appreciate all your guys' comments. You've been so generous and sending me messages, and I just thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It really does me good to hear how God is speaking to you and moving you, and I just really, really appreciate all of your support, so thank you. I am going to start tonight with, I think we left off on February 4th, so the days are moving kind of slowly for you guys, and the reason is February was the month before I moved, so a lot of stuff happened. A lot of stuff was packed in to February. God was really drilling into me in February. So the first thing I did, I watched the Potter's House. One of the associate pastors, Michael Phillips, was doing a sermon called Don't Miss the Turn. So it was recorded, I don't remember, it was 12 days before the 4th, whatever that is. I didn't look it up, I apologize. But it was on Job chapter 2, verses 1 through 13, and chapter 42, verse 10. And one of the things he started out with was it starts out with the word again, meaning it had happened before. And this was when Satan was in the presence of Jesus and God and saying, I want to do some harm to your servant Job. So Satan has been allowed to have an audience with our Lord more than once because it says again, so he was there again. There's nothing that says he's not doing that with us, going and saying, let me at him, let me at her, let me at him, let me get my claws in and see if they'll still follow you. He's got a lot of weapons formed against us, and we have to be careful, and we have to make sure that we're staying on the path God wants our feet on. But something he said in this that really got me, and I'm not going to go through the whole sermon on this one because I want to get to the next one pretty quickly, but it said, God has already set things in motion and it can't be undone. And that just reminds me of all the other times in these other segments that I've told you that pastors have said, it will come to pass, it can't be revoked, it can't be undone, it can't be rejected. All these ways they keep saying it over and over and over, that what God has set in motion can't be undone. So that spoke to me in that sermon. And then also he talked about weeping mode. And I wanted to talk to you guys about that for a minute because I didn't know about weeping mode. Maybe you do, but I didn't. So this was really a epiphany for me. Because, I told you I've been bawling, like all I do is cry, right? Everything has been making me cry. And he was talking about when you go into a new dimension, there's weeping. And he compared it to a baby being born. And, when it's in the womb, it's warm and snuggly and sounds are muffled and it's fed and it's not feeling any pain and, and then it's born and there's cold air and you can feel the wetness and you feel the pain from the birth canal and you hear all these sounds that aren't muffled anymore and all the sensory input, they cut the cord and there's no more food supply and, there's just all this newness and the baby cries, right? New dimension. And he talked about that when you move into a new spiritual dimension, that there is also a lot of tears. Because there's a lot of pain that you go through and a lot of experience, just deep emotional experience that you go through, which I certainly had. And so he said, what you're going through, wait, let me rephrase. Use what you're going through to go to the next dimension. And then he said, it's gonna mean taking the stuff you went through and leaving some of it in the past. And when he said that, I immediately thought of all my Kansas stuff, right? I've got to leave so much in the past. And he's not talking just about that, like about stuff and people, but about some of your pain has to be left there too. And certainly I had plenty of that there that I did leave there. And then he said, God put a boundary on weeping mode. And that was a relief to me, because he said he put a boundary on the ocean. You know, he said you can only go this far. And he put a boundary on weeping mode. It won't last forever. So that was a comfort to me, because like I'm ready for it to stop. It mostly has stopped, which is great now. But we're into, the end of March now when I'm recording this for you. So, but back in February, that was a real comfort to me to know that's not going to last forever, and that it means I'm going into a new spiritual dimension. Partly that part kind of scared me a little bit, because it's kind of scary, right? Like you don't know what to expect or what's going to happen or what's going to be expected of you, and if you're going to be able to do it. But I know that Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So I can do it through him, but it's still a little scary. So then he said, what God put in motion, it won't stop. So he said it again. And he said, it's not going to get done until you do it. And that really hit me, because, maybe I don't want to do it, but it's not going to get done until I do it. And so he said, he brought me this far to take me to the next dimension, but the enemy wants to keep me silent. And so he talked about that the enemy is going to try to disrupt your future. He's going to try to dilute your testimony, and he's going to try to pollute your walk. And your next move is so important. So Satan is going to attack, and he's going to try to disrupt things and get you sidetracked and get your focus off of where it needs to be. And he's going to try to dilute your testimony by causing you to sin and pollute your walk by people maybe finding out, so that maybe you're not as credible as people thought. Well, we're all sinners. We all have sin. Whether you know what it is or don't know what it is, it's there. Everybody has it. And so we need to make a decision, a conscious decision, to try to walk away from that sin, to get better and better every day, right? And he said, when Satan tries to disrupt your future, it's not a destination, it's a decision. You've got to decide to be there. And God's going to show up in an enormous way. So you make the decision that you're going to focus on God, and you're going to do what he says and be obedient, and not allow Satan to form that weapon to disrupt your future. And even when you mess up, because we do, you guys, we're human and we make mistakes. God will forgive that and let you have another turn. So take heart. But then I really wanted to get to this, and it's on the 5th. So look at that. Woohoo, we're getting through 2 days in one session. But I was watching Greater Archview Baptist Church, and he said some really good things in here. He said how to handle your adversities. And I wrote this down. I don't know that he said this, but I wrote it down. Satan wants my mind off God. I need to stay focused. God told me to move. It's about God, and it's all for him. And I wrote that down because I told you guys I write down when he speaks to me. I don't want to forget that I didn't make this up. I'm not imagining things. This is real. And so I wrote that down. I kind of put a square around it, highlighted it. But something that he said in that sermon, he said, you're freed by God, but the enemy will not let you alone. But do things anyway. Set your sights on the destiny God ordained. If your mind is in captivity, focus on God and move forward. He said my words, both of them. So I, of course, circled it because I was excited. Focus on God and move forward. And then he said, if you focus on the past, it's going to fracture your present and it's going to paralyze your future. And that's so true, because when I would focus on Kansas, which is going to be my past, it wasn't yet, I hadn't moved yet, but if I focused on my Kansas stuff, I froze, you guys. I didn't even want to think about leaving. It was so difficult. So it definitely fractured my present, because I couldn't live in the present because I was so worried about my past, but it paralyzed my future because I wasn't moving towards it. And he said, you've got to move, and God has a future you can't imagine. And he said, again, you've got to move. You can't stay where you are. You have to have faith in your future. And he was, let me see, sorry, I licked my finger. He talked out of Exodus 14, 10 through 14. So I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning, but that you have to have faith in a future was out of verse 12, because the Israelites were all wanting to go back to Egypt because they thought they didn't have a future where they were. But he said, the devil is a liar, which we've talked about before. There's a future that has been given to you. No excuses. And remember, we talked about excuses are just self-imposed limitations. And he said, no excuses. If God is on your side, have faith. And then he said, in verse 13, Moses said to the people, fear not, which also means stand and see, like what the Lord will do. It means relax. Don't worry. Chill. God is still speaking today, and he's going to deal with our fear. So he said, stand and see doesn't mean don't move. It means don't take your eyes off God. Take your eyes off your problems and look at God. And he again said, nothing will stop the plan of God. So that just kept getting pounded into me, right? And he said, focus on the fight. The Lord will fight for you. You don't have to do the fighting. So just stand still and let him fight the battle for you. And this whole sermon spoke to me so loudly, because so many times he said to move, and he said, focus on your future, and God's got this, and relax. And it was just really comforting to me to remember not to let Satan have any weapon against me prosper, that I just need to stay firm in my faith, stay in his word, stay in my prayer time, and focus on what he's telling me to do. And I don't know what he's telling you guys to do this week. I don't know what he's talking to you about or what he's dealing with you about, but I know there's something that because, we're all always changing and growing. And so there's something he's dealing with you about. And whatever it is, you guys, get in his word, read. If you don't understand what you're reading, you can go to BibleGateway.com and look that up, and it'll give you, notes about what it's talking about in its context. And there's all kinds of study Bibles out there that you can find if you want an actual, like this is a John Mcarthur study Bible. None of them is definitive, the last word. It's this theologian's take on what, from his knowledge. He knows Hebrew and Greek, and he can dissect the original text, but there are other theologians that maybe don't agree word for word with what he says. Different people see it a little differently. But get into something and start studying and see what God does, because he's going to move in your life, and he's going to show you what he has for your future. So I hope that you'll do that this week. Remember to stay in prayer. If you're not in a church or in a home church or a life group or anything like that, I would really encourage you to do that as well. And drop a comment below. If you do go to church, tell me where you go. If you're in a life group or maybe a neighborhood Bible study or something like that, just drop a note in the comments. Let me know what you're doing. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, this is Jennifer J. Bye-bye.